Starting. And we're live from the Nine-Sided Circle. This is our usual talks within the Nine-Sided Circle Sunday night talk. And tonight we're talking about Sufi stories. We have a small group tonight. I think I wore everybody out last night. Who knows who might come in later. But here we are. And so Sufi stories are interesting. They are not exactly like Zen stories, which is what they're most often compared to. And there are several kinds of Sufi stories. The most common kind is the teaching story. Teaching stories are specific for breaking people's conditioning and paradigms. That's what they're for. And I'll give you an example. Many Sufi stories are about a fellow by the name of Mullah Nasruddin. He was a real guy. Lived in Turkey in probably the 13th century Common Era. And he has a tomb. You can go there. You can go to his tomb in Turkey. And you go there, and there are these giant wooden doors, and there are chains across the doors, and there are locks on the chains, and there are ropes around the locks, but there are no walls. That's Mullah. And Aaron is here. So let me tell you a story of Mullah Nasruddin and his donkeys. So the Mullah, once a month, would show up at the border between Turkey and Iran, leading a string of donkeys. And on the backs of the donkeys were baskets filled with straw. And the Mullah would go up to the guards, the border guards, and they would always say to him, "Mullah, what are you doing?" And he would look at them and he would say, "I'm smuggling." And they would search him. They would search through every basket, and they never found anything. And so they had to let him go because they couldn't find what he was smuggling if he actually was. This went on for years. Finally, the Mullah retired, a rich man, and moved to Alexandria in Egypt, and where he was living a very comfortable life. And one day, as the Mullah was walking through the great market of Alexandria, one of the border guards who had met him every month and was visiting his family in Alexandria saw him. He ran up to him and he grabbed the hem of his robe and he said, Mullah, you have to tell me, all these years, you kept telling us that you were smuggling, and we looked and we tried to find what you were smuggling, and we never could. We searched every donkey you had and nothing. You're beyond the laws of our country now. Please, Mullah, tell me, what were you smuggling? And the Mullah looked at him and said, donkeys. So, the classic Zen story, only with a turban. Designed to shock you momentarily out of your present paradigm and make you look at something differently. And that's the function of the teaching story. Now, lots and lots of Sufis have done teaching stories. Yeah, everybody hears Mullah's stories. His stories have been co-opted. They've been changed. People have filed off the serial numbers, given them new paint jobs. I've seen them show up in movies. It's kind of funny. It's like an infection. So it's the idea of the shock is important. And the stories will actually follow an enneagrammatic pattern if you know how to see them. Another example I can give you. So Mullah Nasruddin was in the village one day and he meets this traveler. And the traveler says, I was a rich man and all of my wealth basically did not give me happiness. So I decided to travel for the rest of my life until I had found joy. And so far, it's terrible. I have never experience joy on my travel. The mullah looks at him and he grabs the man's pack and runs off with it. And the man's chasing him, and the mullah is running, and the man is running, and the mullah ditches him, and he goes out, leaves him way behind, but he's hearing him coming down the road looking for him, and the mullah leaves his pack in the middle of the road. And the man comes up, and he finds the pack, and he's happy. He's overjoyed, and the mullah is sitting behind the tree thinking, well, there you go. Now, what do you think that means? You guys can turn on your microphones if you want. There's only like 5 of us tonight, so we can talk about this stuff. And it's more fun for me if I'm talking, or if I'm talking with you rather than at you. So
it's a question of looking at the basket half full and not half empty.
The question is looking and seeing that the basket is there instead of down the road with the mullah. Yeah, it's an interesting sort of thing. A man decides to climb a tree, and he climbs up the tree. And when he gets to the top of the tree, he discovered that going up was easy, but coming down could be a little bit more difficult. Mm-hmm. And so he's trying to get down, and he sees no way to get safely down. And so he starts crying for help, and everybody comes up, and Mullah Nasruddin comes up, and he says, I know what to do. And he tosses a rope up to the man, and he says to the man, tie the rope around your waist. The man ties the rope around his waist, and Mullah grabs the rope and he pulls, and the man falls out of the tree and falls down and hurts himself. And the Mullah said, I know that this works, but I can't remember. Does it work for trees or does it work for wells? Now, these are all kind of funny and, they make you laugh. But the point is to make you think. The point is to challenge your paradigm and force you to shift your perspective from what you usually think of to a whole new way of thinking.
That's why it's called a paradigm shift.
Getting the story. Yes, preferably without getting the storyteller burnt at the stake, which is why they're oftentimes told as jokes, because the old saying, if you tell somebody the truth, you better make them laugh. So, man stuck in the tree. So, anybody hear any good stories?
You shared a few.
All right, such a quiet group tonight. So, along with the teaching story, there is the testing story. Now, most of you all have experienced the testing story in one form or another. And those of you who have been on the forum have experienced the testing story in the sense of the dance of the new moon. You all remember the dance of the new moon?
Yep.
But that's a long time ago. I got to do that again just to vex people. The dance of the new moon is a testing story. It is not designed, well, it is designed to open your mind, but it tells you by the way a person answers the story where they're at and what they need. And it tells you whether they are right for the work or not.
Okay, I'm not familiar with the story.
It's a longer story. And
you can save it for another time if it's too long.
I might have it if you want me to send it to you.
Yeah, okay, that'd be better.
Oh no, I have. Yeah, I have it. I just got to find it.
Yep.
There we go.
If it's too long, Kyle can just send it to me. We can deal with something else.
Well, I think
Oh
he
no,
wants
we
to
might as well do this.
share it.
But if the others have already heard it, you know.
Well, it
So
doesn't
is
matter if
David
you've already
again.
heard it because nobody in this group has answered it yet.
Oh, okay. Are they afraid to answer? Is it that bad?
No, it's not that bad. It's that hard.
Okay.
There we are. Take me a moment to pull it up. This is a long story and it needs to be done correctly. So
Do I have to take notes?
only if you want to.
Okay. Let me get out some paper.
So
I think it's on
there are a
the
number
too,
of
but
testings. Here we go. The Dance of the New Moon, a Sufi tale. Once there was a seeker who had heard of a dervish monastery hidden somewhere deep in the Caucasus Mountains, where certain secrets were kept in trust for those few people who found a way to the sanctuary and proved themselves worthy. Having heard, he set his heart on finding the monastery and acquiring the treasures that it held. After a long and perilous search lasting many months, the seeker, whose name was Jorg, found himself in front of a pair of large iron-bound doors set in the wall surrounding a convent built into the saddleback between two peaks. There was an old copper bell hanging beside the door. Jorg reached out and rang it. A short while later, the doors swung slowly open, and Jorg's gaze was met by the smiling eyes of an old man. Or at least at first glance, the man appeared to be old, with white hair and beard, but this outward sign of age was contradicted by a quality of vital energy that emanated from the man like a subtle perfume. "Good afternoon," the old man said. "I am Brother Sos. How may I be of service to you?" Jorg explained that he had come to petition for admission to the fraternity of this monastery. "You are blessed, young sir," Brother Sos replied with a smile. 2 days hence is the Halal al-Akbar, the first new moon of spring. It is at this time that we test new applicants for admission to our mysteries. The old man led Jorg into the monastery and took him to a small but clean and surprisingly comfortable cell. He instructed Jorg to await the evening meal in meditation, and with a smile and a nod, he departed. At the hour of sunset, the old man returned with 2 bowls of rice and vegetables. Brother Sos invited Jorg out onto the terrace to relax and eat while watching the beautiful mountain sunset. After their meal, the old man said, "Tomorrow you will spend your day in meditation and fasting as preparation for your challenge. During your time of testing, you must speak to no one save me, and you may ask no questions, even of me, about your test. I will meet you again to break our fast in 2 days' time and give you your instructions." On the morning of the second day, Brother Sos arrived with food at Jorg's cell door. They ate in silence. The old man beckoned Jorg to follow him. They went to a low building that was separated from the main body of the monastery, called a semachana, or a house of attention. Jorg was led in, and Brother Sos motioned him to sit. The room was of exceptional size and in its center was a large octagonal space lowered 3 feet into the floor. In the lowered area was a group of people, men and women, each dressed in a long white shirt and pants with a sash tied about their waists. Each was standing in a different pose, and all of them appeared to be perfectly still. There were several other people sitting around the periphery of the octagon, each of them watching the individual standing in their poses. Throughout, though the room was silent and all of the occupants were motionless, there was an electric feeling to the air, and air that was quite stimulating, like a strong cup of Turkish coffee on a cold morning. After a time, Brother Sos motioned Jorg to stand and accompany him from the building. The old man offered Jorg a seat under a tree and then sat beside him. What you have just seen, Brother Sos said, was the dance of the new moon. This is your trial. Every day for the next 28 days, you will spend 1 hour in the Semakhana observing the dance. You may attend at any time after you break your fast in the morning until the 10th hour of the day. You may not attend after sundown. You may not ask questions or discuss what you have seen with any other of the people attending. At the end of 28 days, I will ask you to explain to me the meaning of the dance. If you can answer the riddle of the dance, you will be accepted into our brotherhood and initiated into our teachings. May your endeavor be blessed by the real. With these words, the old man stood up with remarkable energy and walked away. The next morning, Jorg returned to the Semakhana and spent an hour watching the group of men and women standing, kneeling, sitting, or laying in various postures. He began to wonder why this was called a dance, as the participants were obviously not moving. Jorg also wondered why there was so much palpable feeling of kinetic energy in the room. After the allotted hour, Jorg returned to his cell to ponder what he had seen. Day after day, Jorg returned to the hall, but try as he might, he was unable to penetrate the mystery of the dance. He examined each of the dancers individually, trying to see a pattern. Each dancer was in a different posture from day to day, but there seemed to be no sense of how they had changed. No two dancers were ever in the same posture on any given day, but certain postures seemed to be held by different dancers on different days. Jorg counted the number of dancers. There were 28, 14 men and 14 women. But other than the obvious symmetries, he could not see the pattern. Day after day, Jorg came and watched the dancers, and each day the dancers remained in seeming stillness. Other than the intense feeling of energy in the room, there was always just a group of people in seemingly random groupings of positions. Jorg became more confused daily. As much as he tried to penetrate the meaning of the dance, all he had for his effort was frustration. Finally, the last day came and went. Jorg's mind was in a panic. His thoughts ran through every teaching he had ever received, hoping that something would help him make the meaning of this so-called dance become clear. He even began to wonder if there was some sort of trick that the members of this brotherhood played on seekers so that they would not be overwhelmed with new members. Sleep escaped him that night. The next morning, Brother Sos appeared at the door of Jorg's cell with a pot of tea and 2 cups. "Come, sit with me, young sir. Enjoy the morning," the old man requested. Jorg accompanied Brother Sos to the monastery garden with no little trepidation, dreading the moment when the question would be asked. Brother Sos gestured for Jorg to be seated on the bench under a magnificent mulberry tree, and pouring 2 cups of tea, asked, "Young sir, have you penetrated the mystery of the dance?" There is the story. So, It's up to each of you who hears the story to come up with the answer.
You're right, it's hard.
Yes. If it was easy, everybody'd do it, you know? But that's an example of a testing story, of which there are many. This is one particular testing story, and it's one that is specifically connected to my tradition. And very few people can answer it. I will tell you that. Very, very few people. And there is an answer. There's a right answer. This is not like, oh, I'm just going to come up with a Zen answer to it, put my shoes on my head and walk out of the room or something. It's not one of them kind of stories. This is a story that actually has a real answer. And if you can penetrate the mystery of the story, that means you are worthy.
Well,
The good news is that you're worthy even if you can't penetrate the mystery of the story.
thank
But,
you.
Yeah.
And you expect me to give an answer?
Well,
No, I don't expect
Not
anybody.
right
I don't expect anybody to give me an answer.
yeah.
And I will tell you that nobody has ever been able to answer the story on the first hearing, in my experience. Maybe some great Sufi master heard the story and immediately penetrated to the heart of it somewhere, but that is lost to us. The shortest amount of time that I know of that anybody has ever taken to answer this question was about 5 months.
Do you remember when we worked on it
Serious work.
together?
Yes.
Yeah.
Kyle, send it to me because I need to read this again and again.
Sure. No problem. I can do that.
Yeah, I'm in the process of taking this story and turning it into a video, which is just the story being read. And that will be available for people because it's much more fun listening to it than it is reading it. Yeah, I actually never read it for like years. As a matter of fact, I never read it until I wrote it down, to come to think of it. Because the story is meant to be heard.
Right.
And it's meant to be read to people or recited to people in a certain way. Because that evokes the proper energy and transmits the baraka, as they say. You know that term, baraka? It means, it literally means blessing, but it's thought to be a kind of energy that is transmitted between people. It's probably all bullshit. Don't worry about it.
No, it's a fascinating story. It's just that you have to sit there and really. I think it's one of those things that if you look at it and listen to it and overthink it, you never come up with an answer.
That could be.
You know, sometimes you look for the complicated
What do you
story
think?
behind it, and it's just not there.
Yep. And this will be a particular trial for you as a dancer, because everything that you've ever learned about dance will come to the fore. And some of it will be useful and some of it will get in your way, because that's just kind of the way it works.
Like all
So
kinds.
Dave, have you figured out the answer yet?
No, I haven't, but I did have a very interesting few things happen from trying to figure out the answer, which was cool. It's sitting there. Yeah.
Tell me about it.
So at first, like, of course, there was the like trying to find significance in small aspects of the story and tying it to things that I had researched. And then a little while after I got kind of the self-observation aspect of that being not the way to do it very strongly. And then that provoked just kind of want to figure it out in a different way, and being open to not knowing that way. It was just sitting there like that. So it sparked a number of other things in my life, which is cool in that I kind of assessed what I really knew and could do in the world rather than just knew in theory. And I've done that before, but I did it at a deeper level this time, and it came up with a few very interesting things. There's a few things that I do with my work that I know to some degree, and then there's some other things that I thought I knew but was still kind of baking. And so at the point now, it's still kind of in a way, it feels kind of tantalizingly just at the perimeter or just beyond the perimeter. And I don't have a problem with it sitting there. It's sitting there, and I want to figure it out, but it's just sitting there. Like, it could be infuriating, but I actually find it quite nice sitting there in a way. Sitting there.
Well, not being infuriating is a good positive step in the right direction.
I think so.
I will tell you that traditionally, what you do with this story is that you become Jorg. You imagine yourself walking into this place, and you create it in your mind as vividly as possible. And you see the dancers there, and you feel what it feels like to be sitting there with that feeling of kinetic energy in the room. And you just sit with it. And that's the quickest way I know to find the answer, if you can find the answer. How about you, Kyle? Any insights on that without giving away the meaning of the story?
I mean, I just remember my struggle with it was that I was super determined not to ask for help, and that seems to be my way often. But yeah, I was going through a breakup of a sort at the time, so I made sure that when I made time to work on that story, it was like all in. And yeah, it just kind of pieced itself together in the end.
Yeah. So there's a third kind of story. This is called an initiatory story, which is to say, merely by having the story told to you, something starts inside of you. Actually, The Dance of the New Moon is a little bit of an initiatory story as well. It's not a full-blown one, but it is as close to an example as we can actually get, because you are not allowed to tell initiatory stories in a group. They're one-on-one work. And you don't know them until afterwards. That's the weirdest thing about them. It's like someone tells you a story, and then 3 months later you go, wait a minute, everything changed. And this is something that is you find cross-culturally.
No, the story didn't change. The person listening to the story changed.
Yes, that's the whole idea. Stories don't change. People change. That's sort of like. So those are the qualities of stories that one has.
What are you thinking about?
What am I thinking about? I'm thinking about another story.
Mm.
So, Mullah Nasruddin goes to the Shah's palace because the Shah has invited him and a bunch of other people for dinner. And of course, he's dressed in his patched robe and, you know, looking all threadbare and ragged because that tends to be how Sufis look most of the time. Sufis are t-shirt and blue jeans people. So seriously, if we had had t-shirts and blue jeans back 1,000 years ago, that's what Sufis would have worn. But instead, it was patched robes. So he goes there, and the Chamberlain looks at him and sits him at the place that is furthest away from the head of the table with the emperor and everybody else. And he's in this tiny little corner, and you know, he can't even see around this big pillar that's in the way and can't hear anybody talk. And he eats. So next week, he gets another invitation to go. And this time, he goes dressed in his robes, his finest garments, silks and satins. And he goes, and the Chamberlain takes a look at him and puts him up at the head of the table. So the mullah starts taking the food and rubbing it on his clothes. And he's like, you know, rubbing the gravy under his arms and rubbing the chicken on his shoulders and, you know, putting the vegetables on his turban. And the Shah says, "What are you doing, mullah?" And the mullah says, "Well, you know, it's obvious that it is the clothes that were invited here, not me, so I'm feeding them." So
Very good.
So, what is the dance of the new moon? Quick, tell me, somebody, except Kyle.
Ask Aaron. He's the one who's not saying anything.
Yeah, Aaron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to watch out for the quiet ones.
Well, actually, I do remember Mushtak talking about the story in the Enneagram class, and I feel like I might be cheating if I recall correctly some of the things that you brought up in that class as far as that story went. I don't remember if you had explicitly said that what you told us was the answer, but I do feel like it was pretty useful information.
Well, if you think you know the answer, send it to me. Don't give it away. Because the one thing we don't want is for anybody to cheat. And if you get the right answer, people will be copying you. And do you know what happens if you get the right answer? Kyle, what happens if you get the right answer?
Nothing.
Yes. That's right. The duck does not come down and give you $100, no matter what.
No.
Not interested in the money anyway.
Yeah, but you would probably be the only one who gets that reference. Say the magic word, and the duck will come down and give you $100.
I don't know. I could use that.
It was actually that was something that was said by one of the greatest mystics of our times. That being Groucho Marx, of course.
Exactly. Like I said, you're dating yourself when you say that. Going back to
Oh,
that
yeah.
show.
Yeah, I never missed an episode of You Bet Your Life,
My dad makes
which
me watch
probably
that
says a lot
sometimes.
about me.
I haven't thought about that show in years.
Oh, God.
Dave and Kyle probably don't know what we're talking about. Well, maybe
I
Kyle
know what
does.
you're talking about because my dad loves those old shows. So I catch it once in a while when he's like, "Come here,
Yes.
take a look at this." I'm
I was a
watching this
child
thing
when
on
that
YouTube.
TV show came on.
Yeah.
And I remember my folks being
So-
into it.
Mhm.
Mullah Nasruddin was scheduled to give a religious speech one day to an all-male audience, but he had no particular topic in mind. He thought of one and began preaching. "Gentlemen," he said, "we must stop allowing our wives to wear makeup. It is inappropriate, indecent, impure, wicked, and by all means sinful. Any man who lets his wife wear makeup should be ashamed of himself." "But Mullah," said one of the men, "your wife always wears makeup." "Yes, that's true," Nasruddin remarked, "and she looks great, and it looks great on her, doesn't it?"
Oh.
So as you hear these stories, ask yourself, how is this affecting me? What do these stories mean? Do they mean anything? Are they just, clever little jokes? You know how Nasruddin got to tell his stories? When Nasruddin was a young boy, he went to a school, and the teacher at the school was a saint, one of the hidden saints of the world. And Nasruddin was a very precocious and ornery child, and he was always playing tricks on people and making people laugh. And he finally played a practical joke on the saint, who cursed him. And he cursed him with enlightenment. He said, "Nasruddin, you will reach the highest pinnacles of enlightenment in your lifetime. And the only way you will ever be able to express what you know to anybody is in jokes."
Ugh. Better than being burned at the stake, though, right?
Yeah, better than being burned at the stake.
I would say so, yes.
Yeah. So Nasruddin is not the only source of Sufi stories out there, of course. Jalaluddin Rumi wrote this book called the Masnavi. Masnavi is actually a meter of poetry, and it's basically 6 volumes of one long story, or of hundreds of different stories. The Thousand Nights and a Night also mostly originated as Sufi stories, or a lot of the stories in it did. Faruddin Attar's The Conference of the Birds is an initiatory story. If you read The Conference of the Birds the right way, it will take you into a completely different state. Tale of Layla and Majnun is a Sufi teaching story.
That one I know.
So, yeah, lots and lots of Sufis have written books with stories in them. Excuse me. Either one big story or many smaller stories combined together. Dave, you look like you have a question.
I have a question. With the Conference of the Birds, is there a translation in English that you recommend?
Basically, whatever you find.
Okay.
There is no good translation of it that I know. What I recommend is that you learn to speak Persian and read it in the original, because that's where that's where the deepest meaning is. But Barring that, yeah, any decent translation is a start.
Thank you.
You know how hard Persian is to learn Persian is.
Ah, I do.
I know you do after all the time you spent
It's,
there.
yeah, but it's not as hard as learning English.
True. It's a problem. But the problem with Persian
Yeah,
and
as
Arabic,
somebody
you have
who
to, you have
used
to
to,
master the calligraphy first. And after you figure out the calligraphy, then maybe it becomes a little easier.
yeah, I never
Spoken
found it that hard. You know,
and spoken Persian is
yeah,
easy, of course.
yes. Well, it's more regular
Mm-hmm.
in its own way.
Yes.
So, stories. Stories are designed to change you, and they're designed to uh, show you where you are in the world. They're like signposts.
Mm.
And that's how Sufis use them. And they oftentimes, that is when you are working with people, stories are the tool by which you teach them, because it's easier to assimilate the knowledge that way. And they also allow you to say things that get you in trouble if you were to say them straight out, which is always a danger.
Mm.
Yeah, Mansur al-Hallaj can tell you about that.
Mm.
If you don't know who he was a great Sufi saint. And he ended up getting killed because in a moment of ecstasy, he told the truth. And
And the truth
that can
will.
get you in trouble.
Yes.
Yeah, the truth might set you free, but first it's going to piss everybody off.
Yeah. R.I.P. Halaj.
Hmm.
Yeah, so learn from him.
Mm.
Hide your truth in stories.
Isn't that what comedians do?
Mm.
Sometimes, if they're good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Often, yeah.
So, Mullah Nasruddin is hanging out with the Shah again, and the Shah lays out a meal, and they start eating, and the Shah says to the Mullah, "Mullah, what do you think of this meal?" And the Mullah says, "It's wonderful. It's delicious. It is great." And the Shah says, "I didn't like it very much." And the Mullah says, "You're right. It's a terrible food. It's no good at all." And the Shah looks at him and says, "You just said that it was good." And the Mullah looks at the Shah and says, "Yes, but I work for you, not for the food." So I'm going to sit here and tell you guys stories like that all night. I have hundreds of them. I have my notes here with story names. I go, "Oh, tell them this one. Tell them that one."
So where did you find them all? Like, who told them to you, or did you read them and then remember them well enough to tell them, or?
Or collect them. You probably collected them over a period of years.
I definitely collected them. Most of them were told to me originally, though there are a couple of decent books on the Mullah stories out there. Unfortunately, a lot of the collections of his stories that are written by people who are not Sufis and don't understand the stories.
Yeah.
So when they write them down, they don't get them right. So I'm trying to give you as close to how I heard them as possible. And because I come from a storytelling culture originally, it's fairly easy for me to remember stories.
Mm-hmm.
Another story. I've told this one a few times, and some of you have heard it. Maybe all of you have heard it, but it could probably bear hearing again. As a matter of fact, I know you've all heard it one time or another, somewhere in the deep, dark mists of your past. You heard me say, "One day Mullah Nasiruddin was outside his house looking all over the ground. And a man came up and said, Mullah, what are you doing? He says, I'm looking for a gold dinar that I dropped. And so the man starts helping him look, and they look, and they look, and they look, and he's not finding anything. And the man says to Nasiruddin, Mullah, do you remember where you dropped it? He said, yes, I dropped it inside the house. The man looks at him and goes, then why are you looking out here? And Mullah looks at him and says, the light's better out here. So, yes, you all remember that.
Yep.
And I hear a dog. There's a dog.
Puppy.
Puppy. Come say hi, Bodhi.
The dog wants to tell a story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So becomes another question. Does a dog have Buddha nature?
Depends on the breed of the dog, I guess.
Ah. Well, Bodhi is a weasel hound. That's his breed.
I'm not familiar with those.
From a long line of weasel hounds.
From a long line of weasel hounds.
Yep.
Yes, Dave?
Yes. So my question relates to the talk from yesterday a bit. Do stories work upon the world of symbols?
Yes. The right stories will. Mr. Gurdjieff said that there are two kinds of art, and storytelling is an art. There is subjective art and there is objective art. And those stories that are objective art, which is art that is designed to affect everybody in the same way, or everybody in the same way according to their station, work at the level of symbols. There is a kind of art called the legomenism, which is another term coined by Gurdjieff, and that is an artifact in which knowledge is stored. Bye, folks.
Take care. Bye, everybody.
And so some of the stories, like the Dance of the New Moon, is a legomenism. It is an artifact in which knowledge is stored. It's the mystical equivalent to a USB drive. So this is the physical equivalent to a story of that sort. Information is put in and can be recovered from it if you have the right software.
Cool.
Nice analogy.
Yeah. Kyle, you turned your microphone off. There.
I have another question related to that, just briefly. Those
Okay.
stories seem to cross time in that they were made a very long time ago and still function in this day. Is there a need to also create stories of a different order for this era, using examples that are commonplace for this age?
Yes. Oops. There are always new stories being created. And excuse me. Some of them will become like Nasiruddin stories. So yes, this is a dynamic art, a dynamic skill. And you don't just rely on old stories because if you did, eventually they would become useless. Because the story, in a story like the stories we've been talking about tonight, context is everything. So, one day, Mullah Nasruddin went to a local doctor and told him, "Every night for the past month and a half, I have dreamt that I had been in wrestling matches with donkeys." The doctor gave Mullah an herb and said, "Eat this, and your dreams will go away." Mullah asked him, "Can I start taking the herbs tomorrow?" "Why?" inquired the doctor. And the mullah replied, "Because I'm scheduled to wrestle the championship match tonight." So, yes, stories are important. Now, in the Enneagram class, we talked about the Enneagram of storytelling. And you'll notice something about all of the stories that I have given you tonight is that in each of them, there is a shock point. And the shock point is designed very, very specifically to deliver something new that comes from outside of the process of the story. And you can tell when that happens because every time the shock point gets there and you get the shock, you laugh. In these cases, the shock points are punchlines. So that's basically my talk on storytelling. You guys have all heard my commercial, but I'm going to do it again just in case somebody sees this video who has not heard the commercial. And if I don't, Steve will get mad at me and can't be happy with that. So let me tell you about the commercial. The commercial is that you can learn all about storytelling and the inner secrets of it as part of the Ultimate Enneagram class. So if you go to ultimateenneagram.com, and you can actually purchase and download that entire series that Steve Barnes and I did and find much great and wonderful information. So there is that. And I have one slot has opened up in my schedule for anybody who wants my special deal, once in a lifetime deal of getting private consultations with me that will be either 4 sessions for $200 or 3 sessions or 6 sessions for $300, which is half of my usual price for an hour's worth of my time. And one lucky individual or one unlucky individual, depending on how you look at it, can pick up my one open slot. So those are my 2 commercials, and thank you for putting up with them. And that's it. That's what I got to say.
Yep. And I guess I should do my own little commercial, plug my
Do your commercial.
yeah, so my blog called Light Goes Rogue is an ongoing project that I'm working on. I haven't been posting lately because I've been feeling under the weather, but these things kind of emerge in their own time. And yeah, so you can find that at one word, lightgoesrogue.wordpress.com. For now, till I get the, got to get that web domain going.
Yep. Yes, so you owe it to yourself to go there and read her writings, which are very, very good and profound and probably more accessible than a lot of stuff out there. Certainly more accessible than anything I say. So.
Well, different angles, different ways to learn.
There you
There
go.
we go. Yeah,
Great.
Yes. And you have the acute angle, and I
Mhm.
have the
of
obtuse
course.
angle. Yes. All right. Well, thank you, folks, for coming this evening and giving me somebody to talk to, because it's no fun just talking to out into the void and hoping that somebody listens.
No, we
And we will pick up again. We will pick up again next week.
Great.
Same bat time, same bat
Same bat
station.
channel.
All right. Good night, all.